All right, so this is our first Ring Speaker of the Year. Does anybody know who Alfred A. Ring was? I mean, the speaker series is named after him. Alfred A. Ring was a longtime real estate professor here at UF. Was a prolific author, responsible for not only creating sort of real estate education at UF, but I think influential throughout the country. This is one of his textbooks, Real Estate Principles and Practices. It has a 1967 copyright. The first copyright of this book was 1922, right? So this goes back some time. So he was a longtime supporter. His family wanted to create something in memory of him, so they wanted to create the speaker series. So do you know what an endowment is? This is just full of little lectures here today. So his family created an endowment, meaning if they gave money to the university that throws off income, so we don't spend the corpus, we don't spend the capital, we just spend the income that's generated by the endowment. So his family created an endowment, and we use that to support the Ring Speaker Series and things related to that, right? So that is Dr. Ring. So I'm delighted to well, he's already here, so I don't have to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Joe Brady, first speaker of the year. Most recently, he was CEO of the Americas for the Instant Group. The Instant Group is based in London. They're a global developer and consultant in that flexible workspace environment. Prior to that, he was head of real estate for Walgreens and oversaw a portfolio of 150 million square feet of retail, office, and industrial with, I believe, annual operating expenses of like $4 billion, if I read that.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And probably a little more capital expenditures on top of that? Or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Three.
So, immense. So he's a frequent writer and speaker on the changes that are going on in working and shopping, and certainly I'll be interested to hear. I doubt you'll get through this without saying something about work from home, right? Many of these students, when they graduate, think they want to work from home, and of course, a big debate, a big discussion in the industry is long-term impacts of that on not just on office, but on retail and others. And he's also a firm believer that the commercial real estate industry needs to quicken the pace at which the industry is adopting to rapidly changing technology, including AI. So I'm certainly interested to hear your thoughts on that. So please welcome Mr. Brady.
Thank you. Good afternoon. How's everyone? Good news, no PowerPoint. I wanted to take first of all, I'm honored to be here. And I think you should be honored to be here as well. This is a phenomenal program that you're in. I had a chance to meet some of your colleagues earlier, which was fun. We had a good conversation. University of Florida is doing some amazing things here. So you should be proud that you're a part of this. I understand there's 59 of you right now. Hopefully, my money's on all 59 to matriculate. It's the biggest class. So that's phenomenal as well. Was everyone at ICSC? Just kind of getting a ballpark? Yeah, good. I'm going to talk a little bit about my story, my background, what I've been doing in real estate, how I've made different decisions and had different positions. I'm going to talk about retail as an asset class. I'm going to talk about office as an asset class. And as the professor said, we'll talk a little bit about technology too, because I think ultimately all of that's going to come together. So we might be all over the place here. Real estate in and of itself, real estate doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? It exists in an ecosystem. And when it's a healthy ecosystem, things go really well. When it's a monoculture, when it's not healthy, things don't go very well at all. I moved to Florida 2 years ago from Chicago. I spent 30 years in Chicago, did an awful lot in and around the city. Somewhat saddened right now at some of the conditions that are happening. But I think resiliency is something that you're going to see from a number of different cities. So does that sound good? Do a little bit of background, talk retail, office, little technology. So hopefully at the end you'll have an understanding of my journey. Don't be shy. Raise hands. Ask questions. Love for this to be a dialogue, and love for you to take away some things to think a little bit differently as you pursue your studies and continue on. So I was talking with Professor about when I started. I first got a degree in electrical engineering from Villanova University. I've never used it. I can't even fix a refrigerator. But I graduated and immediately went into real estate through a really interesting opportunity. It's actually how I met Kelly Bergstrom through our shared fraternity. My first job in real estate was Pi Kappa Phi Properties. I was managing 15 fraternity houses across the country. And it was phenomenally interesting. So I didn't know what I was doing. I had some colleagues who worked with Kelly who were on the board. We actually went to a bank and refinanced some fraternity houses. Like who in God's green earth, like who would finance a fraternity house? But it actually happened, and it was a really good learning experience. And through that experience, living in Charlotte, North Carolina, this was 1986 to 1988, I applied to the graduate school program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It wasn't even called Keenan Flagler then. And so I went there, Mike Miles, Dave Hartzell, and I sat in your seat and absolutely just loved it. It was a phenomenal program. And my first job out of school in 1990 was with First Chicago Corporation, which is now part of JP Morgan. And it was doing real estate workouts. Now, I know the professor has always said prices can go down. And we're going through a bit of a cycle right now where interest rates are up and valuations are going down, and there's some headwinds in the real estate industry. But at that time in 1990, we had the savings and loan crisis, recession. There were massive workouts all over the place. So my first job was coming in and being a corporate finance analyst at First Chicago doing real estate workouts, right? And it was a really good. Actually, my thinking was, I want to go and work for a bank because I want to see where the money comes from, right, Drew? We talked about that. And it was even better to learn and see a lot of different mistakes that were made. Some were mistakes and some were market timing, and you can't time markets, but that was a good experience. So from First Chicago, I went to work for Burger King Corporation, right, because that makes sense, doesn't it? I had an opportunity to manage all of the retail in the Midwest. And these were Burger King stores. There were, 60% were corporate owned, 40% were franchised. And through that, I met a franchisee who I wound up partnering with. And this gets to a funny moment in my life. And you'll appreciate this in a second. So meet up with this guy, and we were negotiating a pretty complex deal in Springfield, Illinois. He lived in Decatur, Illinois. And he wound up buying these closed stores that the corporation owned. And in so doing, we struck a relationship, and he was looking for a whip-smart young MBA to grow out his business. And I thought, yeah, I want to be an entrepreneur. I know when we were talking about this idea of being an entrepreneur, and how many of you want to be an entrepreneur? Okay, that's a lot. My next question usually is, do you like to sleep at night? And I had a professor in business school, Dick Levin, who actually said that. And I kind of smirked as well, but until I had 7 Burger Kings going, and I had, the breakfast manager at one store couldn't show up because of some domestic abuse. I mean, I had everything going wrong. Couldn't sleep at night. And then this is one of my worst days. We had 7 stores together, and they were throwing off a lot of cash. But I remember a distinct moment when a trucker threw a double Whopper with cheese at my head. And I thought, that's it. I'm like, I don't need this shit, right? I mean, I loved everything about finding the dirt, building the building, kitting the whole place out, getting everything ready up until that point where you turn the key and you let the public in. At that point, I'm out, right? And so that was a profound moment for me, kind of going through doing different things. It's really important to learn what you don't want to do. And I don't regret that experience. It was great. I walked away with some burger bucks, as I called it, and moved back to Chicago. And then at that time, it's really interesting. There's an industry that doesn't even exist anymore called the home video rental industry, right? And I joined a little company called Hollywood Video. Hollywood Video had 100 stores. And at that time, this was 1996, Blockbuster was already at 1,000 stores, right? So to use the fast food parlance, they were McDonald's far and away. And there were about 8 companies vying to be Burger King, number 2 to their McDonald's. Hollywood Video was one of them. And this became a really exciting part of my early career, because the founder of Hollywood Video was a guy named Mark Waddles, and young guy, just huge ambition. And he said, we're going to open a store a day for the next 4 years. And so I was part of that real estate team and that leadership team that was opening retail stores. These were 7,000 square foot boxes all across the country. Minot, North Dakota in January, I was there, right? I mean, all across the country. And that was really a fun time. There's a little company called Netflix at that time that came knocking at Hollywood and said, yeah, love for you to buy us. You know, you could buy us for like $90 million. And of course, Mark was so smart at that time, he passed on that. And then a number of things happened, and that whole parade came to an end in about 2000. Hollywood Video got acquired by, what was the video rental company in Dothan, Alabama? It was so long ago. I'm blanking on it. Whatever. Point is, that company acquired Hollywood Video, and the whole shooting match was bankrupt 12 months later. So gone. There's only one Blockbuster left in the country. Does anyone know where it is? Bend, Oregon. I was there last week. It was hilarious. They make their money on merchandise now. It's like Be Kind, Rewind, that type of stuff. So that's a whole industry that literally doesn't exist anymore. So I had 3 other partners who were all leaders in the Hollywood Video gig, and we were out of a job. So we got really good. We opened 2,000 Hollywood Videos all over the country. We built this great network of brokers and developers all over the country, and we figured, let's take our show on the road. So we got cell phones, we got business cards, and we had a lot of ego, and we said, okay, we are now the Standard Group, and we opened business as a retail outsourcing company. We did predictive analytics, helping retailers figure out what kind of revenue would be generated if you put a store here versus a store over there, and the impacts on cannibalization. And then we started pitching, and it was tough. This is one of those entrepreneurial moments where you're like, how are we going to feed our kids, right? How are we going to pay the mortgage? Fortunately, and this is going to be a continuing theme about contacts and collecting people, because during that whole Hollywood Video rollout, we met so many people. We had one colleague that went and worked for a little telecom company in Atlanta called VoiceStream Wireless. And she needed some help, so we started opening a couple of stores, doing site selection, negotiating deals, kind of a lot of the stuff that you saw in and around the ICSC. And then this entity in Germany came in called Deutsche Telekom and acquired VoiceStream Wireless, and it became T-Mobile. So it's helpful to be lucky, and it's helpful to have good clients. So our team at this company, the Standard Group, built 2,000 of the first T-Mobile stores across the country. And it was a really good run. We had a lot of fun. In so doing, we were interacting with other clients like Starbucks, Baja Fresh, Texas Roadhouse. We did the initial rollout for Texas Roadhouse. And that was fun. And then I had dinner with a colleague that I knew who was at JLL. And he was running the Bank of America account. And we had this dinner in 2006, and he listened to what we were doing at the Standard Group. We were a little company. We had, 22 employees. We're running around the country, having a good time, rolling out a lot of stores. But it wasn't clear where this thing was going, right? So if you start a company, it's always good to have an exit strategy, right? And during this conversation, Stuart Hicks, the gentleman I'm talking to, was running the Bank of America account at JLL, biggest account at the company. And he listened to what we were doing. He said, "This is one thing we don't do at JLL." He said, "We should buy you." So over that dinner and having that relationship, we were able to sell the Standard Group to JLL. And we closed January 3rd, 2008. I don't know if any of you have studied the global financial crisis or what happened from 2008 to 9 and 10, but it was a shitstorm. It was really good to have a port in the storm. And we were able to join JLL, really grow this whole retail practice within JLL and start doing deals with other clients and actually start doing, for me personally, it was fun because before that point, everything I was doing was in the US, pretty much in the continental United States. And then with JLL, it kind of opened up the world. You know, it was kind of fun. My wife calls me the human GPS, right? We can roll into any town. Omaha, Nebraska, I know exactly where the Whole Foods is, the best restaurants. I've just been to all these places, so it became really exciting to expand and go out and start doing deals in Latin America and Europe and elsewhere. So there we are. We're at JLL, and when we sold the business, there was a 5-year earnout. That's how we structured the deal. There was some cash up front, there was an earnout, but after 5 years, it was sort of fun and was doing a lot of different things. So I wound up staying for 9 years. I ran the retail program there. I ran the banking industry group there, selling the whole firm. And on or around 2016, Amazon was one of my clients, and this was before Whole Foods. So they were rolling out these 14,000 square foot boxes that were last mile, right? So think it was called Amazon Fresh. And Walgreens was another one of my clients. And Walgreens only had 800 closed 14,000 square foot boxes in their idle portfolio, literally 800. And Amazon wanted to grow, and my thought was, well, let's bring these two together. So we had a nice little meeting in Deerfield, Illinois. And the head of real estate for Walgreens at the time was a guy named Patrick Dunn. He was an Irishman. And man, did he have a temper. So we're sitting there, we're having this great conversation. I thought it was going well. And there were some next steps. But Patrick then calls me into his office. And this is one of those really weird things in life. He hands me this resume and he says, "What do you think of this?" And his brogue. I'm like, "I know this guy. Yeah, he's a real estate guy. He's a lifer, whatever." And Patrick just tees off and says, "If I hire this guy, I'm going to fire him in 6 months." And he went on this tirade, like he needed therapy or something, right? And I'm sitting there going, "Patrick, what's going on? Like, what is it that you need?" He said, "I need a change agent. I need someone that's going to come in here, not listen to all these guys that have been working here for 30 years, really shake this thing up." And from that conversation, and there's a reason why he handed me the resume to review, I wound up joining Walgreens. Okay, so I went from JLL as service provider. So think about it. I was a service provider in an entrepreneurial company, so I had to worry about insurance and payroll and all that stuff. And then I sold to JLL, and then I was part of the big machine, and that was fun. But the grass is just grass on the other side, right? Is it better to be an entrepreneur? Is it better to be a corporate person? It just depends on where you are in your life. I mean, and for me, I was really happy to give up that whole entrepreneurial world to go and become corporate guy for 9 years at JLL and be a service provider. Then I had the opportunity to go on the client side with Walgreens. And it was interesting. So some learnings from Walgreens. When I showed up, the company was managing that 150 million square foot portfolio. It ultimately became 9,200 retail stores on an Excel spreadsheet. It blew me away. I mean, it was almost criminal. Managing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate taxes on an Excel spreadsheet. No one talked to anyone. The project management guys were changing rooftops and redoing parking lots at stores where it wasn't even the company's responsibility, it was the landlord's responsibility, right? So there was a whole lot of this, a lot of waste. So in addition to opening up stores, still opening up 100 stores a year, I was able to do a number of different things there. The one thing that was really cool, something that we were talking about, was business intelligence, BI, and portfolio management. Literally, this idea of taking what is opaque, very difficult to see or impossible to see, and driving all of this data into a data lake so that it could get sucked up into a proper dashboard. Have any of you had any experience on the BI side? Yeah, tell me about it, Dimitri.
So it was with Power BI.
Yeah.
Essentially, I was working as portfolio asset manager for multi-res REIT. So I'd be able to pop up my BI and I'd be able to see where my CapEx spending is for how much that month or that year, vacant units, break down all the pretty much critical figures that I would need to see very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to be a recurring theme. Everyone talks about data. Data is oil in the ground. It has potential energy. Unless and until it's extracted, refined, processed, marketed, does it then have value and have kinetic energy, right? Data is just ones and zeros. Insight or intelligence comes when you're able to organize that data in such a way that the right people can look at the right dashboard, ask the right questions, and then act in a certain way for the benefit of the company. All right, and so I know you have next semester, spring semester, there may be some action in this department, but my point is there are more Excel spreadsheets out there than you know of. And there's more opportunity for you as a real estate professional to really harness all of that data into insights, and such that you're asking the right questions and you're driving the right activities. That make sense? Yeah. Walgreens. What else happened at Walgreens? Anyone here interested in capital markets? Yeah, Wilson, what are you thinking about?
I actually had an internship this summer doing capital markets, mainly on office and industrial. It was interesting. You'd see a lot of exotic deals come up with the company wanting to do a sale leaseback or ground lease portfolio. It was cool to see the process of those deals.
Yeah.
How they went through.
There's a lot of power in that cap rate curve. Do you know what I mean by cap rate curve? Yes, no? So there's valuation. So I'll explain what we did at Walgreens. We had a program where the company at one point was opening a store every 16 hours, right? We incorporated 1,926 Rite Aid stores into the Walgreens portfolio to get it to about 9,200. That is a really big portfolio. And some of these leases were done at a 20-year term. Some were done at 15-year term. But what we saw out in the marketplace where these stores that had 2 or 3 years of term left were trading for about a 7 cap. Is that understood? Yeah? With me? Good. So trading at a 7 cap. If the rent's at about $300,000 or $400,000 a year, what we did was we went to an investor like Wilson and said, Wilson, go buy that Walgreens. There's 3 years left on the lease. And the arrangement we had was that Wilson would then go and buy from Drew. We would tear up that lease with only 3 years left, and we'd write a new 10-year lease. So the difference between 3 years of term left and 10 years was about $2 million. And so Wilson made $1 million in 32 days, and Walgreens made $1 million. All above board, all straightforward. And that lease restructuring program allowed us to leverage the delta and the cap rates such that we drove $40 million of EBITDA out of the real estate department. We were actually a profit center. We were the equivalent of 75 operating Walgreens stores. And no one was stealing from us. Not that I know of. that's a whole nother subject. We'll talk about organized retail crime. So the Walgreens gig was a lot of fun. Did a lot of work around industrial. Anyone interested in industrial? Yeah, Zachary, what's the interest? Have you done anything?
Yeah, I was actually at JLL. I did some tenant rep for industrial.
Nice.
For Region. It was interesting. I think industrial is a really interesting asset class. I think it's pretty cut and dry, which I think is kind of what interests me. I think it's like with office or residential or multifamily, like there's a lot of specifics. But with industrial, it's like, hey, like this is a box. It's the size you want. Like, do you want it or not? Yes or no. So I think that's something that I enjoy. I guess that's like the appeal for me.
And were they mostly distribution centers?
A lot of distribution centers, all like 3PL stuff,
Yeah.
warehouses, and some outside stores as well.
Yeah, my friends at JLL did all the work for Walgreens, which was helpful. Chris Bjorson up in Chicago and whatnot. Really interesting. That was a part of the industrial is an asset class that I'm not as familiar with. I mean, I was responsible for it. I had great experts that were running it, but it was so interesting to see how the distribution equipment was actually built into the actual building itself, right? And it was very complicated. And there's a whole other area around data centers too, which is really interesting and only going to get bigger, right? So Walgreens, we were opening stores, we were doing the sale leasebacks, we were doing the lease restructuring, and then a really funny thing happened. So you may have met some Walgreens developers in your journey. You may have seen some at ICSC, and at one point, these developers were opening up stores and probably making somewhere on the order of about $5 million per store. That's a lot of money because the Walgreens cap rates above the risk-free rate of exchange was somewhere between 100 basis points and 200 basis points, right? Credit in the secondary market was so high that these guys could just turn around and print money. And so Walgreens at that point, prior to me joining, said, okay, big shooter, you now have your plane, you have your yacht, you're making a lot of money, and we're watching you make a lot of money, and we're leaving a lot of value on the table, and you're doing it off the back of our credit. So here's what we're going to do. You get to keep 1 out of every 10 stores you build. Now, we'll pay you a merchant developer fee, $800,000 for all the others. We'll keep the 1. And what happened with Walgreens is they just kept taking that fee-owned store and throwing it in a sock drawer. They'd get another, they'd get another 9 and throw it in the sock drawer. So when I showed up, the sock drawer was overflowing. It had $12 billion worth of real estate in it. So I went to the global CFO and said, I think we can shake loose some value here, right? Because the interest rates were still low. The appetite for Walgreens was high. And so we wound up putting together a programmatic approach that $400 million of sale leasebacks were executed on a quarterly basis. And it got to the point where it was sort of getting, we had to walk the line between it being a normal course of business, in which case you can include those profits in earnings, versus it being outside of the rules. So we were able to, 400 a quarter worked. And so those were some of the things I was able to do or oversee and engage in at Walgreens. Yes, sir. What's your name?
I'm Jackson.
Hey, Jackson.
You said 400 million a quarter to be inside the rule. What rule are you referencing? Like, why could you do it all at one time?
Yeah. It was FASB. I'm not an accountant, but there's certain elements of what can be considered extraordinary activity versus ongoing business, right? And so we structured this, and we went forward and talked to our auditors and said, we are going to empty the sock drawer, right? And I mentioned it was $12 billion and $400 million a quarter. Like, we had a long run rate to go. And the idea wasn't to sell everything, but at that point, Walgreens owned somewhere around 18% of the portfolio, and our plan was to get it down to about 10%. But if you're a retailer and you have owned assets, is that the best place to have, from a balance sheet perspective, is that the best place to have assets, owned real estate. What do you think? Thoughts? Anyone? Anna, I'll pick you. Yeah, I mean, probably not is right. And I think the probably part of your answer is the most important, because it kind of depends. Like, what is your strategy? Where can you get capital elsewhere? Are you capital constrained? Are you growing? So it just, I want to emphasize the fact that there's no cut and dry answer, right? You got to analyze it in context of everything else that's going on. So that was a bit of the Walgreens gig. It was a lot of fun. And yes, sir, Noah.
Curious about the strategy you mentioned where somebody would buy one of your Walgreens that has 2 to 3 years left at a 7 cap, and then they would sell, you guys would redo the lease. They would sell it at a lower cap because there's a 10-year lease, correct?
Yes.
So isn't the owner incentivized to have a higher rent so they can sell it for more, where you guys want a lower rent? Like, who would have control when recreating a new lease?
The approach was that Walgreens would say, we're going to do this 10-year lease with you, Noah, and before you had 3 years left at $25 a square foot. Oftentimes what we did is we said, we're going to lower the rent. Like, we could actually lower the rent to $23 a square foot and then put out a new 10-year lease, but the cap rate would go from 7% down to 5%. So the delta between those two created the value, right?
Okay, so the owner that would agree to $23
Yep.
a square foot, they wouldn't necessarily be pushing you guys up.
No, because we're bringing them in. Like, there was a level of collaboration there. Yeah, and said, and if it doesn't want to do it, I'm sure Drew would do it, right? So that was part of the structure. Since that time, with interest rates up, it's not as attractive to do anymore. So it's kind of held off on it. Likewise on the sale leaseback program. So that was Walgreens. And again, part of the continued theme of networking. Yes, Joshua.
I was just going to ask you to elaborate a little bit more on like the general business context of the decision to get rid of so much of the real estate and to liquidate it. Because we got the opportunity to hear from some folks at Publix and learn a lot about them, and I know they really like to own the centers they go to. So I was curious about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Walgreens is the U.S. portion of a global company called Walgreens Boots Alliance, WBA, which is one of the Dow 30. And WBA has anyone been to London? Have you ever been to a Boots store in London? So that's the B in WBA, Walgreens Boots Alliance, right? So it's a global company, publicly traded. And it's a very, very difficult business because you have, and again, we're going to talk about this theme of duration, right? If you go and you have 9,000 stores that have a 10-year lease, okay, and your primary business, which is the pharmacy, 2,000 square feet of the 14,000 square foot box, any of these stores around here. Actually, Gainesville was a really interesting test market where we did an awful lot of redevelopment, testing, all sorts of different prototypes. 85% of the profit of the store comes from 2,000 square feet, which is the pharmacy. That's scary. What's really scary is the contracts that are driven through, I don't want to get into this too deeply, but the prescription benefits managers, the PBMs. Always beware when someone shows up and says, hi, I'm the new middleman, and everyone's going to save. Like, you're going to save over here, and you're going to save over here, and I'm going to make billions. Like, I don't understand that fuzzy math, but that's what's happened with these PBMs. CVS was smart. They just went and bought one, so they own their own. But Walgreens was reliant on contracts that were administered through these PBMs that would be like the Department of Defense. It could be Florida Blue Cross Blue Shield. It could be any of a number of these different programs. And the thing about it was those contracts flipped on a 3-year cycle. So at one point, the Walgreens stores in Central Valley of California, Bakersfield, et cetera, were at the top 10th in the whole fleet. They were the best stores. They were phenomenal. And then Walgreens lost the Department of Defense, and they lost 2 other contracts. And I'm getting a call from the district manager saying, hey, this real estate's terrible. We're now in the bottom 10th. It had nothing to do with the brick and mortar. It had everything to do with the business. So the point was, how do we shore up the business? How do we de-risk? How do we drive some earnings that will help? And then there was another wave of challenges that were happening. This is going to be part, again, real estate is not an isolated 4 walls and a roof, right? The New York City portfolio, has everyone been to New York City? Ever been to a Duane Reade? DR, right? Duane Reade's are everywhere. Walgreens acquired Duane Reade for about $1 billion. I got a call from the regional manager saying, we're not making any money in New York. The real estate's too expensive. Can you come in, take a look at it, and let's restructure some of these deals? Now, it was true that some of these real estate deals were way too rich. But when I looked at the P&L, there was one thing on merchandising, which we won't go into, but there was another thing at the very bottom that said ORC, $85 million with brackets in red in New York City alone. $85 million. Organized retail crime. This was not little old lady stealing a tube of lipstick. This was Tony Soprano of the dark supply chain. This is a huge issue right now. I'm going to attend the ICSC Global Trustees meeting in a couple of weeks in Minneapolis, and this is front and center for the trustees. Companies like Target, Amazon, Walmart, et cetera. I think Dollar General just reported, and they basically said their earnings were negatively impacted due to organized retail crime. It is rampant. So when you're talking about strategy, you have all these different components. I never thought loss prevention would factor into my daily thinking as being the real estate professional, but it did. So, so pressure on the 2,000 square feet of the pharmacy, the ORC issue, and then stock price. That's another element where senior CFOs looking at it and saying, our market cap, our stock price is not where we want it to be. So, is that helpful?
Yes.
There's a lot of context there. You got more than you wanted, I think. Good. So, yes, Zachary.
I just wanted to ask you more about the shareholder stuff and being a public company. Has that, for example, working at Walgreens, a public company, you have to make the shareholders happy. Did that ever influence your decisions and go in a direction that you might have not necessarily wanted to go, that you might have thought might have been better for the core business versus just to pleasing shareholders?
I would say my personal experience was conflict within the company, where this group wanted to do one thing, that group wanted to do another. And I'll give you a great example. So I'm trying to make really good investment decisions and approve really good deals for Walgreens. There's a group that controls the rewards program that was hoarding their information. They wouldn't give the real estate research people their data. And so I went over and, I didn't know any better because, apparently you're not supposed to talk to that guy. Well, I didn't care. I went over, sat down and said, hey, I need this information. You kidding me? I want to understand this consumer behavior. What's Noah spending? How can I understand better, get better intelligence so that I can make a better decision in building another $5 million investment in a store? So my biggest thing was, hey guys, it's the same ticker symbol. We're on the same team here. Why are you hoarding it? What benefit is it to you? That was one area of frustration, and that was somewhat personal. But I would tell you, within a publicly traded company, there's enough risk management typically to keep everybody within the lines, within the bumper guards, right? So people aren't going rogue or doing crazy things. It's just something else to deal with, I didn't find it. There were times where you'd have to go to your attorneys, or you have to go to the treasurer, you have to, and get guidance. Like, hey, I've got this crazy idea. Can we do it? And then the answer might be no. Okay, fine. But at least we were pushing it. So, I'll keep going. The continued theme of collecting people and networking is really, really important, because I was at Walgreens. I had the machine was going pretty well. We built the BI dashboard. We got 20 different disparate groups and point solutions, whether it was lease administration, property management, FM, all that stuff. All of that data was down in a data lake. It was coming up into the right dashboard. The right decisions were being made. And I was kind of thinking, all right, it's been 3.5 years, and it was a culture, as you go into companies, culture is vital, right? And the culture was such that there were people younger than me that had been at the company for 30 years, right? It's the only air they've breathed. I mean, literally, it's like no perspective. And so it was always, the Walgreens way. And that was getting a bit stifling for me. So I got a call from a friend from JLL in London, a guy named John Duckworth, who called up and said, hey, mate, we're looking for someone to run the Americas. Are you interested for this company called the Instant Group? And he told me what the company did, and I just had no idea. And then I had another call with him, and he tried to explain it. So in summary, the Instant Group does 3 things. One, it is the Airbnb of flexible office space globally, right? So call it brokerage globally. The second thing the company does, is around interiors development. So call it development of office space. The company's built 22 offices for Amazon all throughout Europe. So that's a really interesting thing, building this office space. And the third thing the company did is around consulting. And the consulting was interesting because there was consulting around RFP and procurement, which is, if you're a big company and you want service providers like a JLL or a CB or a Cushman or someone to come in, there's this whole song and dance that happens. So that procurement. There was strategy and change, which is very traditional consulting. And then there was sustainability, which really got my attention. And so I wound up visiting with the senior leadership in London. I wound up joining the company as the CEO of the Americas in December of 2019. And my investment thesis was, this flexibility stuff seems to be on trend, right? Not many people were working on Fridays. Dirty little secret, pre-pandemic, occupancy levels in office buildings were only 60% max, right? On average across the board. So when everyone's saying, everything should go back to pre-2019, everyone should be back at the office, before the pandemic, it was only at around 60%. So, when you hear statistics, kind of beware. December 2019. So between December 2nd, 2019 and Friday the 13th, March 2020, that fateful day, I'll never forget that, because I was in New York on that Wednesday. I was hoping to go to the Big East tournament. I told you I went to Villanova. I like basketball. I was supposed to go to the Big East tournament on Thursday night, and my daughter was studying in Scotland, and my wife freaked out and said, Grace has to get home. So my daughter on Thursday flies to New York, meets me. We fly home back to Chicago on Friday, and that was it for the next, 2.5 years. That was the pandemic. And it occurred to me that the business of the Instant Group was not on trend, it was absolutely on point, right? This notion of flexibility, agility, and thinking about how to create places of work for people that were in addition to an office space. And we're going to get more into office asset class and work here in a bit. So, it was really mind-numbing to me. And one of the things we decided to do was crowdsource globally on a periodic basis. So every 2 months, we were interviewing industry leaders, corporate people, owners, advisors, architects, everyone around the world, and collecting it in what we called the Agile CRE think tank. And we started collecting this really interesting information and publishing it because, in a vacuum, leadership is paramount. Someone had to step forward. And so we wound up building the business. We wound up quadrupling the business from a revenue perspective through the pandemic. So I departed at the end of June. When I started 3.5 years prior, we had 20 people in the Americas. When I left, there were 80. And we quadrupled the revenue. So kind of a cool business. We refinanced it a year ago in March. IWG, you've probably heard of Regis. They became the largest single shareholder. So anyway, long-winded, that's my story. Did a bunch of different things, was an entrepreneur, corporate, service provider, lots of things. And it was fun. So my question to you is, why are you here? I'd love to hear from some of you, why are you in this program? What are you hoping to get out of this? Trent, we already talked. Romney, we talked. Sean, how about you?
Yeah. So real estate was kind of always on my mind, I guess, growing up. I've always tried to find an industry where I can combine quantitative skills along with person-to-person interaction, being out in the field talking to different industry experts. Didn't management undergrad, and I had no real estate in my family, so getting in was a little bit harder. Did an internship, found I really enjoyed it. Took a gap year, did 2 other separate little jobs that kind of further increased my interest, and then I applied, got in, signed the dotted line, and here I am.
Sign on the line, which is dotted. That's good. Yeah. Good. Tori, how about you?
I'm in this program because I know that I want to work in the real estate industry, and I want to make sure that I have a good background of knowledge and experience, and also a network of people that I can enter the industry with.
Love it. Yeah. How many people know what asset class they really are passionate about? That you really, yeah. Craig, what are you thinking about?
Historic preservation.
Oh, love it.
PhD program across the street.
Okay.
And every preservation project is a financial equation on how to make the project itself sustainable, financially viable.
Yeah.
Without writing grants every year.
Right. Yeah. At Walgreens, we worked on a project at the old post office. I don't know if you've heard of the old post office in Chicago, but it's a 3.5 million square foot, 10-story building that laid fallow for 25, 30 years. And a developer came in, and there was a lot of credits that were applied. And you took something that was an eyesore and turned it into a premier asset. It was really fun to be a part of that. So good. Anyone else? Or let me ask you this way. Yeah.
Sorry. Kyle. Hey. I have a few years experience at USSR in the industrial logistics space.
Okay.
Really like distribution hubs, but I think what really interesting about going back after this is I feel like it's the biggest challenge we have to address as a kind of country is how, as e-commerce has driven all these changes, we built big distribution type centers. It's really the next phase that all the B2B e-commerce is coming online. The population demographics move across the country. So there's really this big demand deficit between how we address the need of getting goods into the consumer's home quickly, and industrial is really the kind of precipice of that.
Last mile as well, right? Yeah. And that's why you're seeing, we'll dive into retail here in a second. But that's really important. And that's being driven by technology, and it's also being driven by human behavior, right? What do you want? When do you want it? Interesting. Anyone else really know? Yeah.
I'm really interested in retail.
Cool.
Okay.
Good.
But I like looking at the way that people interact and the way that we can use real estate to create interaction.
Excellent.
Keep people in person when they normal life.
Do what people are kind of anthropologically designed to do. We're tribal, right? We want to be with each other. We want to feed off the energy. We want to support each other, right? Yeah, it's good stuff. Good. Okay, let's switch gears to retail. About 20 years ago, plus or minus, the word shop was a noun. It was brick and mortar. It was a physical place you went to, right? And what's happened over this 20 years is shop has become a verb. It's a thing you do, irrespective of place, right? So we're seeing Target, we're seeing Walmart, we're seeing all these companies do buy online, pick up in store, BOPIS. Like, that's a horrible acronym, BOPIS. You seen that? The Brits have it right. Click and collect, right? Click, collect. It's easy. I like that. But it's vital that it happens. The industry size, by the way, is $2.9 trillion. Just give you some perspective. Like, when you start thinking about the size of these industries, retail's $2.9 trillion. Office is a little over a $3 trillion asset class. So how and why did shop become a noun to a verb? A couple of things. Technology, undoubtedly, right? When you think about Lord Bezos and sitting there on his yacht, right? In the Amazon one-click purchase, Amazon obviously has your address, has your credit card, and can, with algos, fill your basket and send you stuff you don't even know you need. Or it's just phenomenal, right? And what's happened, though, is the consumer, all through this period of e-commerce, and I'm going to talk about e-commerce, there's a number of other descriptors, multi-channel, omni-channel, but for the purposes of our conversation, I'll just say e-commerce, right? The one side of the coin that we're going to talk about today with the consumer on e-commerce really is driven by agency, autonomy, and optionality, right? This agency is the capacity to act. Autonomy is having that freedom from external influences, and optionality is simply having choice. And what's happened over the last 20 years is the consumer, right, has gotten more and more power. And the consumer is going to dictate what's relevant and what's not. Sears is not relevant. Radio Shack is not relevant. JC, on and on and on. There's Bed Bath & Beyond. There's a reason why certain malls don't exist anymore, because they're not relevant. And what we've found is that retail consumer is voting with her wallet, and she's dictating where things are going to go. So I use the female pronoun because, by and large, at Walgreens, it was ingrained in me, our buyer was she. And so the idea around retail space is, at the low end of the market, it can continue to proliferate at a rapid rate. The dollar stores, continue. Dollar Tree, Dollar General, they are opening 900 stores a year and have been. They haven't slowed down. And yet at the high end of the market, Cartier on Fifth Avenue in New York City just spent $100 million renovating their clubhouse, right? But the middle, there's a lot of things that have been happening in the middle around retail where you're seeing the absence of department stores and really the flight to Amazon and other e-commerce. You're seeing Instagram. Like, I don't know how I got sucked into this, but I keep buying stuff off Instagram. My wife's like, will you stop it? This is not good. But, lots of different channels now, multi-channels for us to vote with our wallets. And so, how powerful is e-commerce? Well, interestingly enough, before the pandemic, e-commerce accounted for only 11% of all sales. And through the pandemic, it's now up to 14%. And that number is projected to be 22% by 2025. So nearly a quarter of all retail activity is happening through technology. Something to be aware of, right? The e-commerce right now it's almost just a little bit less than a $1 trillion. It's moving to about 1.4 trillion. So really, really important. And we're going to revisit this idea of agency, autonomy, and optionality and kind of the people being in charge here in a bit. All right, I love whiteboards. Let's do something. Hopefully everyone can see. So, northeast corner, southwest corner, traffic light. Okay, we're going to cite, well, first of all, has everyone heard the old gas station? What is it? What's the gas station, Hubrick, or what, Rubrick?
Question about the gas stations being on a certain side of the road for the way that the traffic would go.
And yeah, so kind of, there's a little phrase that they always use. They teach it in Retail 101. Through the light, on the right, right? So here, we'll go through the light on the right, and then we'll put the gas station here, okay? And we've got a public center here. We've got Target. And I'm not sure what we have here. We just have a field. This is a development opportunity for some of you developers. Where do we want to put the Starbucks? Any ideas? Inside the Publix? Can't do that. Freestanding. It'll be inside, don't worry, it will be inside the Publix already, but you have an opportunity for a freestanding. Wilson?
Is there space in the Publix or Target parking lot, like out parcels or anything?
Good question. Okay, let's say there are out parcels. Which one are you going with?
Which one's on the way to people where people are working?
Nice. So the AM side, right? So if, let's say this is the AM traffic, you know, your movement comes in here, you do the drive-through, and then you go back out, right? That's really important. It's just one of those things that are really important to think about. What about the Walgreens? What do you think? Where would a good place for a Walgreens be? Just along that same time. Think day part. When do most people go to a Walgreens? Yeah. Yeah. So there's a little bit of element about Retail 101 in terms of what's important in terms of citing a location. And we always talk about visibility being the first, most important, right? It's got to be visible. Even though companies spend a lot of money on advertising, you have to have that site out in front, light and bright. Access is vitally important. Without access, I've seen stores die, right? Co-tenancy. Everyone kind of gravitated toward the Publix. Good idea. Most people go to a grocery store 3 times a week. Grocery anchored centers do really well and have been doing really well. The co-tenancy is important. Having that anchor of a grocery store is important, but then also who else might be up here, right? So this is Chick-fil-A, right? And this might be a T-Mobile. Obviously, I'm partial. More and more, though, we need to start thinking about the fundamentals of parking, right? Is there enough parking today? And is there enough access for people to click and collect, using the Brit thing? But something else I want you all to think about, because under codes in many municipalities, there's huge parking fields that are required. What's going to happen in 10 years? What's going to happen with those parking lots in 10 years? I mean, I'm not doing George Jetson sci-fi stuff here, but right now there are autonomous taxis roaming around San Francisco, right? And you think about how the ubiquitous nature of Uber and Lyft and everything else. This is something that you all, thinking about retail, have to factor into the thesis, right? Because we have to get a little bit ahead of the curve and what that means. I don't have the answer, but I just want you to think about it, because right now there is a ton of parking out there. This is not going to be needed. The question is, what do you do with it? What's the adaptive reuse? Could be a fun challenge for you. Well, good. So, on the retail side, you've passed. you cited it in the right place. Any other questions on retail that I can share? Yes, sir.
What do you think is going to happen with that space?
With what space?
With the space you mentioned about the parking lots?
Yeah, I mean, if it's in a suburban setting, there's a chance that it could densify even further, so more buildings. But what buildings could those be? That in the breakdown of live, work, and play, the retail tends to fall in the play side. So could there be offices, or could there be health clubs, or could there be other food and beverage, or could there be residential? Now we're starting to see residential go up adjacent to gyms. Lifetime Fitness out of Minneapolis is not only doing their premier offering, but they're also building multifamily. That could be another example. I'm invested in a fund that owns grocery-anchored centers, and for the first time, there was a long period of time where these outpads were sacred, and there would be this no-build zone, right? I mean, literally, it would be that sophisticated in the lease. A couple of hash marks, like, do not build here. And the reason was that visibility sightline. But knowing that they can extract more value out of the site, they're starting to forego those. And you're going to start to see more densification happening. But I think it's up to some really creative planning and exploration and lots of different things that you might be able to do. Could be more public space. Could turn into green space, which from a sustainability perspective kind of warms my heart, right? Green space for families to run around and dogs and all that other stuff. That could be another element. But it's up to you. You guys need to figure it out. Yes, sir.
As a kid, I grew up in Vegas, and when you would drive down the street, you would see acres and acres of parking, and then you'd see the grocery store back behind.
Yeah.
Well, I was back there recently, and what they've done is they've built out to the road, and there's different signage now for the retail that's back behind. But they've built out to the street, that parking.
Yeah. It's good. How are we doing on time? Okay, good. Switch gears to office. Future of work. Let me start with that. What any points of view in terms of work from home, return to office, mandates? There's a lot in the news every day. Yes, sir.
I'm on Phil over here from an engineering firm. What we do is fairly technical and complicated. And the work from home movement has essentially destroyed any ability for our entry-level staff to learn the skill set from senior engineers and all that kind of stuff. So I have seen the net negative in work from home, but we've kind of gone across the country to like a hybrid model where it's identifying spots where staff want to learn to come into the office when they want to. They can work from home on a flex basis, but I don't think staying at home is the answer.
Good. Hybrid. We'll come back to that. Yes. Paris.
Despite popular belief, people think our generation don't want to go back to work, but it's been a big conversation lately amongst all of us, and I think a lot of us are willing and very eager to go into the office with our first jobs, just because we understand that we're not going to learn the same way that we would just sitting behind a laptop. We're not going to get pulled into conversations. We're not going to learn things that people wouldn't, call us up and tell us those things if we were back at home. So I think people are really eager to do it.
Good. Good. Yeah, Dimitri.
I think the reality of the lessons of the last few years is that flexibility is valued to a certain degree. It might not be to the nth degree of let's get everyone at home, but I think that the flexible workforce where the industry can accommodate it is going to be the target, which will accommodate the businesses and the employee. I think that office space is probably more under threat from technology and manufacturing, creating spaces and workspaces to be a lot smaller. You don't need law libraries anymore. Manufacturing plants don't need 9 billion workers when you have much smaller robotics that can be serviced by a couple of people. So I think the greater threat is probably the way industries are changing with technology rather than people wanting or needing to be there physically. I think that will stay because once your CEO goes in, then those vice presidents go in. Once those vice presidents go in, then everyone goes there below it. And there's like one tier that might be a little bit affected if there's a little bit of disconnect to that upper management, but I think it's a little bit of a waterfall.
That's really good description. Leadership matters. It does, yeah. Yes?
I think that the real estate industry wants workers to be in the offices. So you look in Manhattan, right? All the retail spaces are affected. People go to work. They're going to go out and eat lunch every day at Two Brothers Pizza in Manhattan. But during this time, they've been affected. So the real estate industry wants people in the offices.
Absolutely. I was at a conference where a researcher from JLL sat there and said, everything's going to go back to pre-2019. And literally, I mean, there were snickers. Like, people are like, whoa, guy's smoking opium. Like, what is going on here, right? There is a societal impact on all of this, without a doubt. And we're seeing it in a number of different cities. But let's talk a little bit about office, right? $3 trillion asset class. $1.5 trillion of debt is coming due in the next 18 months. Now, 50% of the leases, the office leases, are going to turn or mature by 2025, and by 2027, 75% of the leases will mature. This, my friends, is a slow-moving car crash that we're watching, okay? Now, everyone's concerned about regional banks and their exposure to office. There's going to be some pain. There's no doubt about it. But given the global financial crisis, given the work the Federal Reserve's done, given the requirements, capital requirements that banks have, the adults are in the room and their hands on the switch. There was just a notice this week that went out to a number of regional banks that said, you need to increase your capital requirements because they know this is coming. So office, a couple of other things. New York City, you from New York? 75% of the office stock in New York was built before the IBM mainframe. There are buildings that are functionally obsolete there. Now, you can tear them down and build One Vanderbilt Place, which is right next to, have you seen that building, by the way? Yeah, I mean, SL Green built one of the best new buildings in the country right next to Grand Central Station. Rents are $280 a square foot. Yeah, pretty good. And it's relevant. Here's what I think's happening. The pandemic was not an acceleration of anything. The pandemic was a tectonic shift where people for the first time realized we can do things differently. JP Morgan was a client of mine. I spent a lot of time with JP Morgan. In Phoenix, anybody from Phoenix? They had 2 million square feet of call center. And they never thought that anyone could do anything with JP Morgan outside of this call center, right? Except for 2.5 years, everyone went home. The residential internet infrastructure held up. There were no security issues. People were actually happier, more productive. And now they have 2 million square feet of call centers sitting there going, I don't think we need this anymore. So there's a number of things happening. You have a lot of leases maturing. You have a lot of companies that have what we call gray space. JP Morgan has a global portfolio of 76 million square feet. Probably 3 million square feet is gray space, meaning it's leased, no one's in there, but it's not on the market. And if it went on the market, it would dramatically impact market rates, because clearly you can buy space in the secondary market in terms of a sublease a lot cheaper than the primary lease. So that's just one company. What we're seeing right now is something I call office having a retail moment. You remember I talked about shop, Shop was a noun, then it became a verb. Work, right now, very quickly, just did that same migration. Just the flip side of the coin. Work was a noun. It was a place you went to. If I would tell my wife, Shannon, I'm going to work, she knew I was going to an office. Office and work were paired. And now they're decoupled. Because work is a verb. Work is a thing we do irrespective of place. That doesn't mean office is dead. And again, there's a lot of clickbait out there, right? Everyone needs headlines. And 20 years ago, like literally, I'm watching the same movie I watched through retail. Brick and mortar's dead. Malls are dead. Retail's dead. Everything's going online. Hogwash. Not true. And the same thing's happening now in office. You're hearing the same clickbait, the same noise. It's not signal. But what I want to tell you is hybrid work is the flip side of the coin of e-commerce. Why? Because we're the same humans. We're the same humans who have had agency, autonomy, and optionality in how we spend our money. And for the first time, we now have the ability to make our money with agency, autonomy, and optionality. That doesn't mean we're not going to go to the office. That doesn't mean offices don't need to exist. But we need to be a lot smarter and less intellectually lazy in what it means to go to an office. I agree with you. Young people need to be in. Like, there has to be curation. There was a Dilbert moment not too long ago where your manager would look and say, well, Romney is sitting at his assigned station and therefore he's productive. He was here 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. He was productive. Like, where's the connection there? It's not necessarily true. Like, passive attendance does not necessarily count. I told you we were doing that research during the pandemic, and I was able to get these great tidbits. I shared some earlier, and one was this idea that, let me get this one straight. Passive attendance doesn't cut it anymore. Like, just showing up doesn't cut it anymore. We were interviewing this gentleman who lived in Westchester County, a suburb of New York to the north. The commute into Grand Central was an hour and a half by train each way. And on average, the cost to commute in Metro New York is about $8,000 after tax. So you get to pay $8,000 after tax, you lose 3 hours a day, and if your boss says you have to be in, and literally you're showing up and doing nothing but taking Zoom calls, Teams calls, or whatever, you kind of start feeling really bad, right? But if you show up, and if on-site is the new off-site, it was one of these pithy little things that came out of Asia, you know, on-site is the new off-site. I kind of love that, because then it wasn't a Dilbert moment, and it wasn't a manager looking at Romney. It was a leader saying, I want to get my people together. I want us to have an agenda. We're going to have a speaker that comes in. We're going to have lunch. We're going to have a social hour. We might do this for a couple of days. We're going to build camaraderie, collaboration, collision, all those words that you hear about. And it's going to take leaders to absolutely drive it. I myself don't like mandates. If you're Jamie Dimon, you can do whatever you want. You're running the biggest bank in the world. And Jamie has a vested interest because he tore down a perfectly good $3 billion headquarters building at 270 Park Avenue, and he's building a $6 billion one. He's going to house 14,000 people in this state-of-the-art building. It'll be phenomenal. But something's happening. The intersection of retail and office is, particularly in a urban setting, that with my Walgreens hat on now, I'm looking at a five-day-a-week daytime population, right? Monday through Friday, typically. Call it 4.5. And I had to make my investment thesis, whether I'm renewing a store or building a net new one, based on that. And what are we looking at now? 2.5 days. So there is a huge issue that's happening in and around CBDs, core business districts, that are reliant on only one of the three legs of a healthy ecosystem: live, work, play. And the work part, we're seeing this repeatedly in places like San Francisco. I was in San Francisco 2 months ago. I was there, and when I was there 4 months ago, I was staying on Union Square at the St. Francis Drake Westin. I stay there all the time. Union Square is gorgeous, Nordstrom out there. Guys, it was a post-apocalyptic hellscape. Like, I was scared walking on the street. I'm thinking, I'm going to have to fight. I don't know how to fight, but I'm going to have to do something here. And it's gotten a little bit better, but it's been bad. Chicago in the Loop, I have friends that are lawyers. All of the support staff leaves by 3:30 because they need enough time and daylight to walk from office to the train station to get out to the suburbs, right? So what happens when you go from 5 days a week down to 2.5 days a week, to the food, beverage, service, all the ancillary retail that's happening in that core business district? They don't have the oxygen, right? And so what's happening is in some of these markets, you're seeing something called a doom loop start, right? And office workers aren't going in for a myriad of reasons, and then you're starting to lose your favorite restaurant and your dry cleaner and your gym, and that's another excuse not to go in, and then it just perpetuates itself. And then time adds up to where it's time to pay to pay taxes, and the municipality says, whoa, 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 we now have a deficit in tax revenue. So what do? They have a choice. You could raise taxes, that's the blood from a turnip strategy, not good, or you could reduce city services, not good. So you've got places like Chicago right now that are going through a really, really tough time. But there's some good news here. And anyone from Chicago?
Went there a couple times this summer.
Okay.
It's on the West Loop area, which is...
Were you over in the Fulton Market area? Yeah, good. So the loop of Chicago is defined by an elevated train. And it's called the L. And the downtown is called the Loop. It is primarily work. There is some residential, there's some play, but it's mostly work. It's a monoculture. Monocultures in nature don't work, right? If you plant the same crop in the same field over and over and again, it will degrade to the point where it's unacceptable. Healthy ecosystems with live, work, play will continue to thrive. And there's a concept called the better business district. And we see it happening in Chicago with this area called Fulton Market. Google went in there. This is a great real estate story. So this area of Fulton Market was the way early on meat packing, right? It was sort of meat, fish, vegetables, all that stuff. It was the marketplace for Chicago. And Chicago was the butcher to the world, right? It fell into disrepair. And then the groovy people came in, and then some really cool restaurants happened, and then there was loft residential happening. And then Google decided they wanted to come in and be part of that community because they thought it was cool. And there's a developer called Sterling Bay out of Chicago. They negotiated with Google, and they bought an old, these buildings were basically giant freezers, like deep storage, deep frozen storage buildings. It took 9 months to thaw this building out before they could actually start doing the build out. But during that 9 months, they had time on their hands. So what did they do? They were smart enough to go to New York City and talk to the developer of 111 East 8th Avenue in Chelsea, where Google went in, and really, it's one of their first really big locations. Google was in every one of the floors except one, and that one floor was Nike. Nike has since moved out. But be that as it may, the question after this whole big tour that the guys from Chicago asked the guys from New York was, what would you do differently? And the answer from New York was, we'd buy everything around here. Because as soon as Google went in, Chelsea Marketplace, the whole thing, it just blew up, right? So the boys from Chicago get on a plane, fly back, call everybody in. They literally put offers on 30 parcels in the next 30 days, including Harpo Studios, which was Oprah's studio on Randolph Street. And where Harpo Studios stood way back when is now McDonald's world headquarters. McDonald's moved from Oak Brook down into the Fulton Mark area. Google is there. I built a Walgreens in the McDonald's headquarters building. So now there's a Nobu Hotel. You know, there's all, like, it's where you want to be. Live, work, play, healthy ecosystem, better business district. It's working. There's going to need some really, really creative minds to think about the adaptive reuse for some of these obsolete buildings that are there. I was talking to a buddy of mine today who's in this building right across from Chase Plaza, and he said, our building is considered the jewel of the Loop right now, and it's 50% leased. That's a pretty low bar, pretty low bar. So thoughts on future of work. Watch it play out. Yeah, Boyd.
I just want to go back to kind of the call centers.
Yeah.
And I know that like COVID really dramatically impacted that industry, and that their productivity is almost better and they're happier at home. What have you seen over like the past year in terms of like trying to reposition the assets? Are you seeing them torn down? Because I know that those spaces have been really kind of hard to fill post-pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, my personal experience has been, there's been a lot of nearshoring in places like Mexico and Colombia, and a lot of offshoring in places like the Philippines. My old company, the Instant Group, we built 400,000 square feet of back office call center for American Express in Manila. There's a little island called Cebu, C-E-B-U, which is, there's Manila is getting full, so they're starting to go to other islands. So we're starting to see that. Mexico City is hot right now. Colombia is hot right now. Bogota is really, really active right now. So we're seeing that. Now, I'm not sure what the answer is going to be with a JP Morgan 2 million square feet in Phoenix. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a challenge. I think what they're doing, though, is sending people back. And Jamie has basically said there's a 5-day-a-week back. You're back in the office. Yeah. You know, again, I get pulled in a couple of different ways, directions, because, you know, on one hand, you all are in a premier program. You're adults. You're going to graduate in less than a year, and then I'm going to treat you like a child and tell you what to do. Right? Now, there's always bad actors. There's always people that are going to abuse the system. But Paris is right. I mean, I think, you know, going in and being a part of the community and overhearing conversations and just being a fly on a wall in meetings and Trent, we were talking about development, right? Yeah, I mean, you know, just if you join a development company, you just want to sit there and listen. Like, don't say anything because you don't have anything to say just yet. Yeah.
Financially, for a company, does it make sense to have their employees in 5 days a week? I don't think so.
And this is interesting. So I will tell you this. There is way too much office space that's out there right now. Companies don't need as much space as they have. There's an element of design that has to be factored in. The space, when I was at the Instant Group, we built out the U.S. headquarters for GSK, the UK-based biopharma. And it's a split headquarters. We built 70,000 square feet in Durham, North Carolina, and 50,000 square feet in Philadelphia. Now, the Durham, North Carolina space is really cool. It's in the old American Tobacco campus, and the space overlooks the Durham Bulls baseball park. You know, 19, 20-foot clear height. And what we built, though, not only in Durham, but also in Philadelphia, overlooking the University of Pennsylvania and Drexel and University Village, were vignettes. We built, in 50,000 square feet, we had 14 different types of space for people to work in. And we had a sensor system that was called XY Sense that had cameras that anonymized photos and took a radius photo every 3 seconds to then gauge where are humans working, or where are they sitting, what are they doing. And we were able to aggregate that data into insights to say, no one wants to sit over here, right? And so in 2 months' time, we realized that this vignette of space was terrible. We pulled it out, and we replaced it, right? And so all of a sudden, this space, from a design perspective, started to look like a really nice Marriott lobby, or like the AC lobby across the street, right? Where you got high tops, you got low tops, you got soft seating. There's even a new word I learned called resi-mercial, right? You know, you had these architects come, well, we're going to do this resi-mercial. Like, what the hell's resi-mercial, right? But it's, you know, love seats and conference rooms that just soft seating and whatnot. But this stuff is what works. And if it doesn't work, then you yank it out and you replace it. Yeah.
So you kind of touched on that, I think, a few years ago, but the emptying out of this, like, I think of places like Nashville, right?
Yeah.
Blowing up. I think you go all these old malls, like rooftop malls, or
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a few projects where they're ripping the roof off the mall, putting a street down, they're going to turn it into like a walkable lifestyle center. Do you think that people will ever go back to urban core, or do you think it's going to be places like Nashville where you access like outdoor living and all this stuff, and they're going to start building these like office, retail, like mini centers where people can go work out, eat, do all that stuff, and urban core is just going to be one of the past? Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is if you're going to have an urban core, you have to have a healthy ecosystem that involves live, work, and play. The absence of those will fall, right? It's a two-legged stool. It's not going to work. Detroit. Anyone been to downtown Detroit lately? It is, I know, but what Dan Gilbert from Rocket Mortgage has been doing in downtown Detroit is phenomenal. Detroit got so bad, Detroit got so bad that urban real estate had a better value as farmland. I mean, literally, no one wanted to go there. Detroit was bad. And now, because of the leadership of a guy named Dan Gilbert, billionaire, he's moved the sports facilities down. Now, closer to home, to us, has everyone been to Water Street, Tampa, downtown Tampa? Yeah? I mean, what the Jeff Vinnick started and what SPP is doing is phenomenal. The original thesis of that project was sports festival marketplace. And this whole thing kicked off with Jerry World in Dallas, where Jerry Jones built the practice facility and then the hotel and all this retail, and then we saw it happen in Phoenix, and we have a number of other examples. The Ricketts family, who own the Chicago Cubs, what they've done to Wrigleyville, unbelievable, right? So it's a really good formula. Kroenke, what he did with SoFi Stadium in LA, we had an ICSC trustees tour of that place. Man, what you can do with $5 billion. It's pretty impressive, So that's where Water Street started. It was a bit of this idea of sports festival marketplace, and then they realized Tampa needs more. And then healthcare was added. There's culture with museums. There's more retail. There's more residential. There's more office. And so you're seeing this really beautiful ecosystem that's coming out of the ground. It's really remarkable. Good. Yes, sir.
For you, what's the value of office space for society right now?
So let's define office space, right? It's not a cubicle farm, right, where you go in and you just have a small little cubicle. I view it as a gathering place. So where people can come together with areas where you can do hard work, heads down, like small little area to work, or a series of conference rooms where you have collaboration. I see the design going from hard and fixed walls that if you were going to amend in any way, shape, or form becomes a landfill situation, which gets into sustainability. We're not going to touch on that. I see space that has movable walls, that has a number of different things, so that companies are going to be challenged with projects that you may stand up and do a sprint for 2 months. So a particular area of space may be used in a different way for the next 2 months than it will in the following 6, right? So you need flexibility in the space, but you have to have this purposeful presence, not the passive attendance for office. There has to be a reason. Don't make me come into the office so I can do FaceTime or Zoom or whatever with a colleague somewhere else, where if I could do that at home, then I'm going to get pretty irked, right? But it's vitally important, and it's going to require leadership and testing, and really suspending this notion of reductive thinking. There is no silver bullet, okay? Just like there's no silver bullet in retail. Hybrid work and e-commerce are two sides of the same coin, and that those things need to be perfected. We're now seeing the importance of the power of the consumer. The employee is the new consumer, right? So you need to sell something that's relevant. Citibank was really, really smart. While JP Morgan was saying, everybody back, Citi said, you can come in if you want. Come on over. You're not happy with, you can join Citi, you can work from home, you can do whatever. We're going to see this as a strategic advantage that some companies will be using, but it will play out. A lot of it's noise, but yeah.
How do you think that the industry will go into making these, scenarios of live work play into fruition? Like, I've seen a lot of scenarios where, commercial firm, a residential firm, so retail, office, and residential will all get together and they'll make this big master plan development, and they'll say, I'll take care of the tenants and bring these big tenants. We're going to, provide high-end retail that's, going to be appealing to these people working, and then homes that, kind of match what these workers are going to be, kind of making and their lifestyle. Do you think it's going to be, projects like that, or is it going to be powers like Google saying, yeah, we want to buy the whole block, and we're going to sell this to a developer, and we're going to keep a tab on it because we know who our target market of these is going to be, and we want it to be our people here. Do you think companies are going to have that much kind of arm strength, or is it going to be these collaborations of different parties within
It's going to be
the industry?
both. Yeah, and Google already bought the State of Illinois building, the Thompson Center in the Loop in Chicago. Helmut Jahn designed building, god-awful ugly, but it's great. It's a whole entire city block. They bought it. Not clear what they're going to do with it, but yeah. And then I do think it'll be collaboration. But you're going to see, big, deep-pocketed folks like Dan Gilbert in Detroit. Vinnick, I think, is out of SPP. It's more Cascade, Bill Gates money there in Tampa. But you're going to see that happening. I was talking with a group in Jacksonville this week. I live in Ponte Vedra Beach, just south of Jacksonville. And this group is focusing on downtown Jax, because right now it's like, why would you go there?
It's not downtown city.
Yeah. In fact, there's a company called FIS that built this cool new Darth Vader-looking black building right on the St. Johns River. And the head of real estate was so proud. He said, I had 80% occupancy yesterday. I'm like, really? He said, yeah, I gave away AirPods. I'm like, well, no kidding, right? You can't buy attendance, right? People are not going to show up every day for a free lunch. It's just not part of it. So, yes.
I kind of have like an opinion on office and all that.
Yeah.
I think people are just getting inherently lazier, and the value, going off of what he said, the value in office is fixing that problem. Like, no one here, at least, or I think at UF, like, goes to the library to check out books. You go to the library to study because you can't study in your room because you can't like get anything done. Mm-hmm. Being around other people studying, you don't want to be the kid who's just sitting there on his phone or her phone. Yeah, I just think people are getting lazy, and fixing the problem is where the value is, but people are too selfish because they got a taste of working from home from COVID, and now they want to do that again.
Yeah, I mean, I think people
And it
will...
goes with AI too.
Yeah.
AI too. It's just making people lazier. Not being able to produce work you're proud of because you didn't do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Now, I know we're running short on time, so it won't be a good session without a Venn diagram, right? Right? So this Venn diagram is technology, people, or consumer behavior, and real estate. And all of these things have to go together. This is vital, right? Why is it vital? So technology, you talked about people are getting lazy. We are in now the most profound technology platform shift since the dawn of the internet. That's how powerful this is, right? Blockchain's not it, nanotechnology's not it, but the generative AI, the machine learning activity that's happening right now is undoubtedly driving this age of acceleration. So I mentioned I was a geek. You can't spell geek without EE. I was an electrical engineering student. There's a guy named Gordon Moore, a co-founder of Intel, who in 1964 posited that every 18 months, the number of transistors on an integrated circuit would double and the cost would be cut in half. So double the power, cut the cost in half. Double the power, cut the cost in half. 50 years later, you have this exponential curve of how fast things are happening, right? Now, couple that with what's happening with superconductivity, which is on the forefront, and quantum computing. There is so much happening so fast that there's a duration risk. The patent office of the United States government cannot keep up with technology and how fast things are changing right now. Real estate's signing 10-year leases. So you talk about this duration mismatch. These are opportunities for all of you to think about. The world is changing faster than ever. Like today is the slowest day for the rest of your life, the way things are going. And so so I'll go back to technology and platform shifts. Every single time there's a platform shift, the new technology is demonized, right? If you want to go back to the Wayback Machine, to Gutenberg in the printing press, right? The monks were really happy writing stuff out. The printing press came and it was evil, right? You know, the whole church came against it. You think about Henry Ford and the automobile, the horseless carriage. You know, think about all those poor buggy whip makers who were out of business, right? There were people in the unions that were making buggy whips and they didn't have a job anymore. But I will tell you, then they started fixing cars. Every single platform and technology shift has absolutely destroyed old jobs, but it has created more new jobs in the future. And is it cheating if you ask ChatGPT to write your paper? Well, yeah, I think it is. But if you can cite ChatGPT as a source, or if you're a medical student and you have access to every single medical journal ever written, that's pretty powerful stuff. And so the idea is not to cheat with it, but to be a better prompt engineer, right? Like it's about asking better questions, finding unmet needs, and taking advantage of opportunities that are out there, and understanding, secondary causes as well. I don't know if people are, there's probably there always have been lazy people. You're not lazy, because if you're lazy, you wouldn't be in this program, right? You're the elite. And you have an opportunity to see, what I hope you're taking away from this discussion is that there's a lot more than just real estate, right? Because technology is dramatically impacting how we look at the world, how fast we get stuff that we want to buy, how we work, where we work. I mean, in 10 years, I would say half of you are going to be doing jobs that don't exist today. Right? So you have to be ready for that. I mean, the only constant is change. So, yes, sir.
I just had a really interesting observation. I went to a conference and they shared a graph that was productivity growth, technological growth, and labor. And even though technological growth is like that, productivity growth is actually pretty flat because we're not adapting quickly enough to the changes in technology to make use of it, right? So there's this weird gap between labor and productivity and I think for me, looking at an organization, when we try and force, it comes in back into play with office, right? Like when we try and force people back to the office, that big labor gap, people have choices and they can say no, right?
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't have to, I can stay at home.
The naysayers, to your point, though, are saying, yes, we're at near full employment right now, 3%, tide's going to turn at some point, but is it? Because the notion is there's way too much data being produced for our ability to actually synthesize it and create intelligence from it. And that's where AI comes in. I mean, AI, there is this symbiosis between human and machine, right? And where machine learning and generative AI is most powerful, particularly machine learning, is in identifying patterns, right? And when I said that you're going to be doing a different job, one of you is going to be the head of Walgreens at some point, and what you're going to be doing is employing machine learning, studying every facilities management ticket. You're going to be looking at every lease. You're going to be looking at every single market, and you're going to have a dashboard that's going to say, Romney, it's time for you to renew this lease early because the market's only going to go up. Or we should stop using this compressor because we have too many break fixes on the rooftop unit and we're losing product because of these cold doors are failing, right? I mean, there's all these patterns that can be divined if you can't see it with a human eye, but you can with leveraging this technology. Yeah.
So kind of leading off what you just said there with AI, and something you said about 10 minutes ago, about the 3-second camera in a workspace, and then that's constantly monitoring what people are doing, and then, it's most efficient for this area, right? You said this area of the room is not being utilized. What can we do? Do you think there's something that gets lost when you're striving for efficiency, maybe privacy or other things that over the next 10 years people might actually yearn for that we think is so important now that might not, I don't know how to word it exactly, but...
You said the P word, though. You said the P word, and we could talk for hours. I mean, look, privacy, right, is, wow. I mean, it's a major issue. By the way, those sensors are GDPR compliant, which is the European standard for privacy and so forth. It just shows a blob of a human. It doesn't show that it's you, Scott, or whatever. So it will evolve. We're humans. Like bell bottoms made sense at one point, right? Maybe they do again. I don't know. Like there will be fads that will come and go, but I think the tribal nature of how we feed off each other's energy and innovate. I mean, it's one of our superpowers in this society, right? That will continue to happen. Yep. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. So obviously there's a lot of disruption in the office space right now. Do you see the same thing that has been happening or will happen in the future in the retail?
Well, I mean, this is the first year in 8 years that there will be a net number of new stores compared to closures. So office is having a retail moment. Retail has already gone through this, right? There's been a reckoning. We've seen the bankruptcies happen. We've seen the B and C malls disappear. We've seen adaptive reuse happen. There will be some that will be in vogue and some that won't. We're seeing more and more that we're digitally native companies that now have brick and mortar. Warby Parker, these are great. You scratch them, you bring them in, they send you a new pair. They now have, I think, close to 600 stores, right? So they'll continue to be that, but that reaction to what the consumer wants. The consumer wants to look and feel and test stuff online. They also want to go into a really cool space and talk to some really cool people and have a really cool experience. The last thing I would say about the notion of work is, an office, is you can't just set it and forget it, okay? Because the office is now migrated into the hospitality realm, right? And if you're going to do office as a corporate entity, you need to understand that it has to be workplace experience. And that if you're a corporate person, you have to understand what the HR strategies are, what the technology limitations are, and what the physical opportunities are. And those have to come together. So that's a really big point about workplace experience. Retail's already gone through it. So just a couple of last thoughts. Yes?
ICSC Orlando, a lot of these guys were saying how great retail is doing. I don't know if they'd say the same thing in New York City. I think it's really like based off the Southeast here. These guys are saying how great that, retail is doing, and I'm like, really?
Well, I'll tell you, the Southeast is really powerful right now. You have huge migration.
Would they say the same thing at ICSC Manhattan or in that center?
Not in the city, but on the burbs. Yeah, what you've seen is more office space getting absorbed in the suburbs, more flexible office space being used, and as a result, the retail in the suburbs has benefited. But if we were going to call my friend at Duane Reade, I probably wouldn't get the same answer. So, just a couple of parting thoughts. Fetch coffee. Be humble. Nothing should be below you. I know, Scott, we were talking about shoveling sand, right? Ask for more. Be hungry. Don't be shy. Collect people. The biggest message I can give you, particularly in this real estate industry, is to collect people. If you can collect people, if you can build that network, if you can reach back to someone that you met 20 years ago. I had a buddy call me up that we were doing deals in 20 years ago. Haven't missed a beat. That's how this industry works, and it's really, you get to do business with people you like and enjoy. Make others look great. Enjoy the ride, be happy, but above all, give back, be of service. And for those of you who haven't Googled Alfred Ring, he was a huge philanthropist, and he gave back in multiple ways. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to give back a little bit and spend time with you and share some thoughts. I'll be back in 2 weeks with the advisory board. Can't tell you how happy I am for you all with this great opportunity. You are in the elite program. You have so many opportunities ahead of you, so many advantages with the advisory group, and take full advantage of it. So thank you very much.